my mind, right? And then reading this, I'm like, oh, then it started thinking, I wonder how many of our kids, minorities, I wonder how many of our kids free reduced lunch are actually part of this highly capable program. I might be wrong, maybe it is equitable, but I bet it's.
But it's a place to
Yes, it's not.
It's a point of data. It's a point of data.
It's a point of data to, are we missing opportunity achievement there if we don't have diversity in our highly capable program, and maybe right in this section, part of that's going on.
And we're defining highly capable, as you're saying, through this one measure.
Right, correct.
Right.
Initially, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like 2 measures
Yeah.
by the end, am I correct, Larry?
I think it's 3. So we're doing more universal screening now to
Which will be good.
do a first tier to make sure that we're capturing as many kids as possible to set up for then subsequent levels of assessment. But
So your first level, but I'm just wondering, this even other school districts, what is the percentage of kids that are in these highly capable programs? What's the percent in Washington State?
What, wasn't, I mean, this whole book was about the stereotypical threat. It wasn't.
So if it's based on the test.
Yeah, it's not it wasn't about it being one test or an
Right.
individual test. It's what the kid walks in and I'm now representing
Right.
my
And
race.
is it,
Right.
and is it an IQ test?
Right, but that's what I was talking about,
Right,
tests for
so
highly
it's
capable.
really a lot about,
Yeah.
rather than what is the test, is how do we communicate to the kids what it is they're doing.
Right.
Well,
But that's
or
where it
how
got
we're
me
framing-
thinking about.
Framing the test.
Exactly.
So if you're framing the test in a way that triggers the
Stereotypes.
stereotype reaction, then
We're
I
gonna see
think,
if
I
we're
think
in this
that
highly
that's,
capable
that's
program.
critical
Mhm.
to what you're doing. Then you really need a reframing of, we just want to know, you know, how buoyant you are, you know, in your brain workings. You know, but reframe it so that it's not a threat like it is for women taking a math test. It's not about that. Or just simply say this test has been looked over and normed for all races or sexes or whatever, but you will not, all different races do equally well on this test, and just try and take that framing off.
So it's fairly simple statements like that were.
That made a huge
difference.
And I think that's what was amazing to me too.
Yeah.
Did you
It didn't take
remember,
much.
did you remember reading the one where they did the study where they had the kids writing down their values on a piece of paper?
And for years
Yeah.
that made an impact.
Yeah, I mean, just like, really? I'll show you this video that reinforces, but, so if you get a chance, blind spot kind of speaks to the idea that we all have stereotypes. That's what this book is about. You can go online and you can take the Harvard Implicit Bias Test, okay?
It's really fast.
It's the one you can do, huh?
It's really fast.
Yeah, so you do this online and you can see, I mean, like I did this one in the book after reading it, and I still have a slight preference towards whiteness, right? Towards white people. And just like, wow, okay, yeah, this is really in us. And then what stereotype, Claude Steele's book is, he's really talking about the impact that stereotypes have on us. What was helpful for me about this one is that I started noticing or looking back on my earlier experiences where I was experiencing stereotype threat. I experience it with men. I particularly experience it with white men in high up positions where I find myself, even if you're calling on me to be the expert, struggling to speak coherently. Like something happens where I discover that I'm trying to prove to you that I am worthy of the hire, like that I am intelligent enough. You don't have to have a doctorate degree. All you have to do is be a white man, don't wear a tie, because that's really going to, trigger it for me. And looking back, I'm like, wow, people say they love to hear me speak, and yet I would find myself in these situations where I was almost paralyzed. And just having the knowledge that stereotype threat was going on for me helped me to overcome those experiences, just to be able to recognize it, I found it fascinating that you have to care about the stereotype. I care that I appear professional and educated to people. So the idea of stereotype threat is I am not just, let's say, engaging you, Larry, I'm also worried about how you will perceive me, which is heavily embedded in the stereotypes about people of my group. So I'm trying to disprove to you those stereotypes that I think that you have of me. You may not even have them, but I think that you do. And so I'm not just doing the work of engaging you, I'm doing both things. Doing both things is what then causes me to not speak as fluid or as effectively as I would, let's say, if it was you and I, Amy. And having, by the way, 3 white brothers does not then change that dynamic. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, our kids don't know that that's what's happening to them.
Yeah.
They think that intelligence is fixed and that it is Asian and white kids that are intelligent, and that they are not because of their race, rather than the cues and the messages and the environment that's also lifting up white kids to believe that they have this ability. Do you see? So the reverse happens too. Of course my voice matters. Of course I'm intelligent. Of course people who look like me are the ones who are in charge. So just while I'm internalizing a sense of inferiority, our kids, some of our kids are also internalizing a sense of superiority that then plays out in different spaces.
I think the biggest problem lies in, and I've said this for a couple of years, in the term demographics. Because whenever we're discussing test scores or looking at things, that phrase gets brought, well, it's the demographics of this school. And I think that that's where the system itself is, as it acknowledges what's going on, is exacerbating what's going on.
Do other people have thoughts about that?
Well, I hear that to a certain extent. To negate the demographics or to not ignore the demographics seems like then we're applying sort of an equality standard to all of our schools, and sort of maybe the corollary to that is we have an equal expectation that all schools are going to perform at a certain level, whereas an equity standard would say there are very real factors about certain schools embedded within their demographics that may impact their performance levels differently.
As long as there's a, what are we gonna do about it, piece to it.
Right, I mean, it's not, I don't think they accept it, again, it's not accepting it as a fixed mindset kind of piece, but, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I think there are.
I wonder if that comes back to me feeling like, you know, when we're talking about this and we see these achievement gaps in certain schools, that it's not easily accessible or doesn't feel easily accessible to ask questions of the principal, because maybe they're already feeling potentially like they're doing everything they can, or they're feeling threatened by what they're seeing because they recognize that's wrong, and they feel they're being evaluated on that, and you know, kind of all this stuff playing into each other.
So maybe a question that we can ask ourselves collectively is, what are we doing to make them feel safe or unsafe to have the conversation? I mean, I think that's a great thing
Yeah, maybe they're not hearing us
to,
correctly.
for us to think about individually.
Because I think, Dawn, having done all these trips with everyone, everyone understands the demographics are real, but the fact that we would like to move beyond that a bit. And how do we phrase it in a way where we're not questioning the fact that it doesn't sound like we're trying to say this principal doesn't care. That's not the point, but we need to see more of a way if we can get moving though. You know, how do we strike that balance where it doesn't sound threatening?
Where demographics isn't an excuse.
Yeah, because sometimes it comes off that way, and I don't.
A lot.
Yeah, and you know, where if we maybe.
But how do we get past that is what I'm saying, so that we can ask the questions and have,
Right.
you know, just have the conversation.
So yeah, you know, so maybe acknowledging the fact that not every kid comes in on this with the same height, and that some kids might need extra boxes. So what do we do to get those kids the extra boxes? Maybe, you know.
Maybe that's our role, maybe that's our part.
Well, yeah, but how can we ask those questions so we understand what we can do to help, without making it sound like that principal doesn't care about it.
That's where I struggle, is I don't even know sometimes what can we do at a policy level to change it. And that's frustrating, you know, because it's like, okay, what, I mean, maybe this is part of all the, not maybe, I'm sure this is part of all the dialogue, looking at all these things, and maybe we'll start seeing some things, but, you know.
Right.
Well, ultimately, I hope the work is moving toward changing it. I
Absolutely.
mean,
Yeah.
that's the
what we all
whole
want.
point of it,
Right.
is to change it.
Right.
And if we're using the word demographics and using it and saying, well, that your expectations can't be as high of us because, gosh, look at our demographics, then that language, I think, needs to go away. But be more of a, what are we doing that gives the two boxes,
Right.
as you say, and is that sufficient? Is that doing the job that's necessary? Because ultimately, we would like to see success.
Right.
I mean, that, does that match?
I think it does.
It's a hard conversation.
Larry, you look like you were gonna say something.
Well, I'm just gonna say, I think that some of the barrier, I hear you, Kimberly, about your perceptions of some of the discussions. I think principals are defensive of
I'm
their
not thinking of
school and all
anyone in
that.
particular either.
No, I can think of people in particular.
Yeah, I'm not, though,
Well,
I'm
I
not.
did a lot of school improvement visits. I think that I would tend to reflect on Janet's comment. I think that often that you carry tremendous authority as board members. You may not fully recognize that or feel that you do because you don't see yourself as powerful in your everyday lives, but how those questions are asked, how those issues are probed, there is a great deal of skill and sensitivity that you need to bring to that, to not put people in a position of feeling defensive or feeling like they're being asked or judged about why your kids aren't performing at the level of Eastridge or Sunrise or whatever frame you may have in your mind. And I think that whether it's intended or not, I think the impact sometimes of how those conversations unfold in school improvement visits is principals feel kind of put on the spot in a judgmental way about why aren't you getting at this more effectively.
Why don't we have them make suggestions? Why doesn't that be part of what they're presenting to us then? Maybe you and the administrators could potentially say to them, hey, in part of your improvements, please give us some information as to what you see part of the problems are and some of the things that you're doing in your particular school to address.
I think they do embed that, a lot of that. I think they do embed a lot of that.
I think some. When we went to Kenmore, I think Kenmore was a junior high or elementary. She was really good about it.
Well, I think though that as we're talking about this specific work and this effort, I think what does continue to bother me, and probably will as long as it exists, is the opportunity and achievement gap that exists. And if it just continues on and on,
Every year.
I wonder, I guess I feel like, just how nice do I have to be in my questioning so that someone won't feel my tremendous authority as a board member, when what I really care about is that gap. And what I really care about is those kids in that gap, and I want to see it close. And so what would you suggest is the balance to get that message across and get that addressed? And I realize that that's not an easy thing to address, but to get real effort toward addressing that.
Yeah, I think it gets to that conversation we had earlier about assumptions, that it'd be a way of somehow acknowledging that 99.9% sure that principal feels just as strongly as you do about that achievement opportunity gap, and it upsets them just as much.
I'm not assuming that, but
Right,
if you're looking at it year after year,
Right, but that's what I'm saying, that I know you're not assuming that, but when they hear that question.
They could be
They could be
assuming that I assume they don't feel the same way.
Right, exactly. And that may be where the defensiveness then comes in.
And I can see that, but at the same time, I'm tired of watching this drag out.
So maybe,
So I think there needs to come some kind of effort that really addresses the problem.
maybe, I don't remember which one you said it, but having as a component of the presentation that they give us, what steps they're doing, you know, just a real acknowledgement of the reality that we see, and then what steps they're taking to address it, to
Yeah, for me, it goes back to, and I've seen this, and I have no idea what your board experiences are like, but I've seen the dynamics of some of this. I've seen community do the same thing with board members, right? Like, what are you going to do? And this is, we're tired and we've been waiting, and board then putting pressure on teachers, and it just kind of goes on, or principals and principals of teachers. And again, I don't want to make anything sound magical, but as you're thinking about how you might engage with principals, it really is that kind of balance that you talk about, Dawn, and like, how do we hold people accountable for what we put them in place to do? So we're not, let's make sure we don't make somebody cry or make someone upset, kind of thing, because we have these expectations, this is what we're paying you for. I tell my graduate students, you're in the big boys chair. That's probably sexist, but you are, this is what you've got to do. And how do you become genuinely curious? This goes back to the norms for me, in engaging them, where you are turning to wonder versus kind of maybe an attack style or what have you, but just say, tell me more, I'm not clear about this, that you're really curious about what it is that they're doing and what supports do they need, and how can you as a board help them to get where it is that they are that you're all trying to go, knowing that you're all trying to figure this out together. Because it is just, in my mind, again, that's the speaking your truth. We all have a part in maintaining institutional isms, and we don't want to make it. It's the students, it's the teacher, it's all of us. And so, when I heard you talking, I thought, being genuinely curious, really wondering, what are the principals doing? Where do they struggle? Where do they need support? Where do they need help? I mean, some of them are able to give you information about changes that need to be made in policy
Exactly.
far better than what, an outside consultant. Your teachers are going to be able to tell you, this policy doesn't work, or this doesn't, why doesn't it work? Help me understand it. Tell me how you were seeing it. What are you experiencing with the students? That your focus groups and your dialogue, and I believe that, I think I recall that you're not just planning to do it with the students, but it really should be trying to uncover, you don't know what you don't know.
And I would love to be at a place, and I don't know if we're there, where they feel like they could give us news they think would upset us.
That's
What if they said, hypothetical, we need class sizes of 12 kids, and then we could do, giving us a response that they know will be difficult for us is, if there's work we need to do to make it so that they can feel comfortable giving us news they don't think we want to hear. I think if we really want that information, we have to, I don't know how we get there.
I see that a teacher at Eastlake versus a teacher at Kenmore, or not Eastlake, East Ridge versus a teacher at Kenmore is not, a principal is not at the same. You probably have a cruddy principal at East Ridge, and they're still going to have great outcomes. You could have the best principal at Kenmore. This is what I truly believe. You could have the best principal at Kenmore and still have a huge gap. So that's where it gets frustrating to me, is because I just want to know what do you see as the reasons and problems. I don't hold that person at fault. I don't think it's their fault. Our principals are usually there, 1 or 2 years? We haven't had long-term principals in our 3 maybe at our type. I don't think we've had people really long-term at some of these more difficult, where the gaps are broad.
We have.
And my favorite principal story was the principal who just shared that they had a problem in one teacher classroom, that the teacher just wasn't as good. Just shared it right out. the kids were behind, and that here was what the staff did when everybody realized everybody coming out of that classroom is behind. Here's what the staff did to gather around those kids who were now a year behind their compatriots there and get that closed. And by 6th grade, they had, just about closed that
Yeah.
before they sent them on to the next level of school, where that could be really damaging.
Yeah.
But to hear those real
Yeah.
stories and just acknowledge this was a problem, and I appreciated that honesty, as Amy's saying, where do you get to a point where you just say,
They can
Look,
take the
this wasn't
risk
great.
and tell us, right?
take the risk and tell, yeah.
And can I just make one comment? Only thing, Kimberly, that I will say is there's a great book called Because of the Kids. White teacher, been teaching for years, black teacher, new to teaching, white teacher, can't figure out why her teaching strategies are no longer working. And the tension, it's a real story where they were at odds with each other. So the only thing that I would say is that we do experience in our country where leaders go into a building and change the schools around. That sometimes that it is the kind of cultural competency or the ability of that leader to effectively kind of lead that building and lead the teachers within and engage those parents and support the students that creates the change. Because I want to go back to like this notion that we all have a role in it. And while I may have been a great teacher, I don't know your schools as well, but you said East, so I'm going to think East Side, right? But this East school, which I'm imagining is the higher affluent, when we usually like disaggregate the data, we often find that the kids that are not the demographics of those kids that are like the lower socioeconomic and the kids of color aren't doing any better in those affluent
Correct.
schools sometimes.
But there's not even socioeconomic difference.
But
in those
there's
schools.
not as many of
Yeah.
them, so they don't get on the data kind of radar, right? So that's the other point. 2 points is
Oh, yeah.
that, the reason why we're doing this is so that we can be better as leaders, as educators, as policymakers, and believing that that makes a difference, engaging students in different ways. Because I can be a great teacher over here because that's what I've always done and what I've always known, but now I've got to make some shifts. This kind of learning is different, or these students come from a different culture. Because then it's out of our control if we believe that, right? It's not us, it's just the students, or it's just the parents.
So, but what you said about displaying genuine curiosity, that really resonates. That's great.
I appreciate you guys saying that it might be in the way I'm asking the questions, but I just want you guys, no, but it may be, but I try to be conscious, I try hard to be conscious about how I'm asking. And, and I'm only gonna get so good at how I ask, but I'm still gonna be direct to a certain extent. That's probably not gonna.
I wasn't
Yeah, I wasn't
personalizing
saying
that to
it
you,
either.
Kimberly, at all. I
Okay.
wasn't. I'm just saying institutionally, the board.
I just asked all the
You have an authority. I mean, this is high stress
Yeah.
and high anxiety for principals when you're coming out for these visits. You may just show up and if you're there for 3 hours, but they are fretting and stewing for weeks about this. And I think that, and it's human nature. It's like when you get your evaluation, it can be glowing in every regard, and then there's one critical comment on it, and that's where you're gonna focus in on. And that, I think, happens in that dynamic. And I don't know that there's a fix to it, but I think that just recognizing that dynamic exists, and to the extent that you can validate and you can be supportive of the efforts that are taking place, even if they're not producing the results that we might all hope for. I think that, approaching it from an asset standpoint rather than from a deficit standpoint, and recognize that even your best efforts may still cause that principal to feel like it's being approached from a deficit standpoint. And just, I think it's just, I have the same effect. If I go in and ask.
I have the same effect, right? Oh, like, here comes the diversity board. I'm like, look, I'm Pooh. They called me Pooh. And I was like, you're the equity police, and it's recognizing the power dynamics,
Yes.
right?
Oh my God.
That is a part of our awareness in this. The effect that we have on people. Recognizing your whiteness, recognizing your class, recognizing your position, all of these things is a part of the cultural competence work, right?
So are you or anybody in the room aware of a district or a school that has been able to make a long-term systemic change to the achievement gap? It feels like when you hear these stories at a national or even a state level, that within a few years, it turns out, you know, the bad stories are that there's fraud or something medical going on. The good stories, it's one individual that when they leave, it ends. So
Because there's a lot of research that says that the leader matters.
Right,
The leader in the
right.
building very much matters.
right.
I don't, again, I'm not familiar with your district, I hope to become familiar with it. There's two schools that I see some really great things happening. One is Franklin High School in Seattle, which is where I went to school, is really doing so. They actually don't get, the principal, they've gotten like the Golden Apple Award, and her school's gotten some awards. But even when you walk in that building, there's an experience that you really can't quite describe, like the feeling of community and the ownership. This doesn't mean that the kids don't ever get in fights or that real life doesn't happen, but there is something, a different kind of ethos that you experience when you're there, and it's very, very diverse school. Another school that I've been working with, this doesn't have to do with my work, again, this has to do with the leaders of the building, right? There's a school, Lake Ridge, in Renton School District, elementary school, newer principal that was just doing some incredible things. Both of these principals, I think like, wow, let's ask them, let's turn to them and say, well, what are you doing? The Franklin principal has a equity and social justice kind of model that is like, that it's not just about how the teachers show up, but really this expectation that we are communities. She has a lot of like belief around like the beloved community, and we're all gonna grow. She does professional development conferences for the youth to talk about equity. You'd have to talk to her, lots of different things. The elementary school principal does a great job around shared leadership. This is what I'm seeing, just like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to approach this problem? What can we do? And then bringing in outside resources to provide what the teachers are saying that is, that they're needed, needing. So those are two that kind of instantly.
I've heard about Franklin's. She's been there for a while.
She's
I
been
think
there
I've
for
heard
a
about
while.
that over the years.
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah.
Maybe we can all visit there and just see, if we could see something of a model, it might help us to, not that we can replicate everything that we would want to, but it might inspire
The
you.
learning.
Just learning more.
I know that our community at one point was lobbying for us to follow Federal Way's example of putting everyone in AP courses if they pass the state test. Then I realized, well, you had board turnovers. You had a superintendent move to Oklahoma, you had assistant superintendent didn't go on with the superintendent, went another place. So I'm not sure you have a real clear, a good thing to draw from, but I've never heard any follow-up on that program. Are you familiar with the Federal Way?
I am
and
not.
what they were doing there?
No, but I will be,
Okay.
Yeah, I know that the assistant soup is
Yeah.
the superintendent, and we'll look forward to engaging them. I know that for example, the Franklin principal has all the kids taking advanced courses, and she's doing some pretty cool things. I've had her come in, because she's a white principal, and so I've come and speak in my multicultural classes to talk about what does this work look like for white people, and what are some of the challenges that she's experienced, even as communities of color have given her pushback. But she's very clear about what her kind of foundational beliefs are around this work, and as long as you can be clear about that, then that can help to guide you even in those kind of really kind of tough moments where,
One of the things we do incorporate, as you know, in our school improvement visits is looking at the the state achievement index, and it's always kind of a mystery, it seems like, as to why we look at that. But one of the reasons we look at that, and just kind of the color shading of it, is because that's really, in my mind, what says, kind of irrespective of, it sort of neutralizes the demographics of the school, and it says, okay, compared to a school that looks similar to this, are we above or
Right,
below the bar?
okay,
Then that's
okay.
kind of the value added
And are
aspect
you
that
growing in
we're,
that area?
and are we growing in that, because it measures growth, it measures raw achievement, and then it also does that sort of relationship to peer schools. And
That's
that's
right.
really why we incorporate that, is to kind of level that playing field, so you could look at a school where maybe the scores don't look like they might look at another school in the district, but relatively speaking, the color shading might say that school is actually pretty high performing
Right,
compared to
Can you,
others.
when we go over that next time, can you just remind us that that's the actual slide? Because
It's those ones that they've got the blue and the orange and the green box.
I don't think I
and it's-
realized it was comparing to same type of
Same
schools.
types of schools.
Yeah, I might not have gotten
Yeah.
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
But only within the state.
Right,
So
but
that-
still, that's useful,
But
like,
still-
I might not have known
That-
that that was the
yeah.
distinction in that slide.
There are some, just objective slides, kind of where schools score just on the
Yeah.
scale. But then there are other, the ones I always focus on are the ones, the relationship to peers slides.
Now, remind me when we're there next time, because I
Yeah,
think I'll probably forget it.
And I'll say that you may, and I don't know your schools well enough, but you may have some schools that are closing the achievement gap, or that are comparative to schools with their same demographics are doing quite well. They're making progress, and sometimes what can deflate leaders is that we're going outside of our districts to look at what's working when we're not tapping into the
Yeah.
resources that we have within.
No,
We're not
yeah.
saying, hey Sandy, tell us what you're doing. Can we talk to your teachers? Can we visit your schools? We're seeing some incredible things. We see some data. We want to know how this is happening. And will you do a presentation at the principals meeting and teach us, that you can cultivate.
That's
You know,
exactly
and
part of
you'll
that conversation, what
And you'll
is
be doing that training with principals?
working.
What
in our
training?
district, that kind of conversation, because that very much is this, because when I've asked that question before, it's been, well, it can be presented, but then is there another principal who will want to take that on? But to have that more, what did you call it? Where is that,
I don't know what brilliant thing I said.
That's not the kind of training that Caprice would be doing, but we've been doing,
She's saying, I mean, other
So, I
principals
mean,
go say, here's what's working.
not to
Right.
get down a rabbit, but like in the last 3-4 years, our elementaries have all been in networks. So there are groups of elementary principals who are connected with one another, they're visiting one another's schools,
That's
they're
good.
observing
Yeah.
classrooms together, they're looking at program together.
Like
We've been doing a
professional
lot.
learning communities.
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot more of that kind of cross-pollination across schools in recent years to start sharing those practices
Yeah, excellent.
across schools, and it's been quite effective.
We noticed that relationship between Kenmore and Lockwood.
Mhm.
That's where I remember first being introduced to that.
Right, and the networks have been fairly carefully constructed over the years, so I mean, if you have all the east side schools meeting together,
That doesn't really.
Right, they're not gonna see that slide too, the equity and equality, right? Like, cause you want them to see, we used to, in Seattle Public Schools, we used to have a group of students going and visiting, so like the Cleveland students would go and visit the schools,
the north.
Yeah.
right, and I mean, and then talk about great conversation.
Right.
Like the students, on either side, like, I didn't know you had all those resources, like, I didn't know you didn't have all those resources, and this isn't fair, and what can we do, and, so.
so do we have time to?
Well, we don't really, and, it really is just, it would just be another kind of delivery of what you have already read about. Sometimes people.
Is it on YouTube?
It's a 2020 video
Yeah,
that,
I've actually seen
that
it.
you can get from like Amazon or something.
Right, I think
but-
I think it's on YouTube, you can Google this.
Pieces of it.
Yeah, I think there's like a 20-minute clip.
Oh, wow, okay. Yeah, I show about 12
Because
minutes
what's the
of it.
name, what's the name of this
It's
one?
called Race and Sex, What We Can't Say or
Is it
something.
the one where they go to the car dealership?
No,
Because there's that one on, okay.
no, this is,
We can try to Google it
Race
on
and
YouTube.
Sex, What We Think But Can't Say. And it's all based off of these two books.
Okay.
Yeah. And then maybe next time when I come or what have you, I can show that clip. I carry it with me all the time. It's Jane Elliott's work is in there, you know, the Blue Eye study. It's talking about the testing and the impact of stereotype threat, basically.
Race and sex, what we can and can't say.
Race and Sex, What We Think But Can't Say.
Oh,
And it's ABC News, it was 2008.
What we think.
But can't say. Any other kind of final thoughts or questions or comments?
I want to know about the possibility of training. I mean, I was serious when I said this, with two of us, you know, going, because we have a professional development that we get throughout the year, and like you're doing the one-on-one training, you know, maybe we do that and go, maybe Amy and I go with her and we take an hour and, you know, you ask some of the questions of us, or we do a paper that would be more uncomfortable to ask in front of the camera.
Right.
That we can,
Yeah. And I want to make sure that you have, now that's a decision you all need to make, right? I
but
mean,
would
that
you be willing, I mean, would that be something that you would think would be beneficial?
that you would come to the administrators' workshops or?
No, that, because how we can't have that, as you're
Right.
saying, we can't have a dialogue, or it's harder to have a dialogue that's personal and really
Uh-huh.
getting at, you know, what stereotypes might I have, what biases might I have?
Yeah.
And we're talking about everyone else out there, but it's really hard to talk about ourselves with the
Yeah.
camera on.
Right.
And so, you know, maybe Amy and a 2 by 2, we meet with you because
Oh,
we can't
I
have
see
a
what you're
quorum,
saying.
we can't have
So,
people.
so for somebody to say, you can call me at any time. You can email me. If I can be of help, I'm glad to be of help. I won't charge you anything to just talk with you over the phone, you know, within reason, right? You can go ahead and pass around my card. It's really when you bring me in that, you know, that it can get kind of costly. This is a big travel. What we do is we don't like, I am really just trying to set the stage today for the work, but we don't like talk to people about what white privilege is. We take them through interactive activities.
That's what I was saying, do it with 2 of us at a time.
But you can't.
Oh, I see.
Right, like you can't, because they are like things that groups of people do. There's assimilation activities I'm gonna do with you. Now, there are some things though, I mean, I do wanna send you some of the articles that, you know, that some of the things that they'll be
It's just
doing
it
will be based off of.
disadvantages us as a board in this
I
way.
know,
I mean,
I'm with you.
Larry's saying what kind of training, it's like, well, sorry.
Yeah,
You're doing this with what number of staff and when?
well, we have dates scheduled throughout the school year.
So we have a schedule, 4 or 5 more sessions throughout the year, and they're kind of combination sessions, so there'll be some general training that will happen with all administrators, and then some more granular training that will take place with our instructional administrators, and there's a training regimen that's been developed.
Yeah.
And it includes the white piece that you're
Yeah, so we'll,
talking
you know,
about.
so, privilege is a common thing that gets at white privilege, like ruffles, like, what do you mean? What are you saying about me? And so we take them through it, you know, you have them do an activity to help them better
See it.
understand privilege. Sometimes there's videos, sometimes it's assimilation, some things when we start getting into like some of the skill building, it might be kind of role playing and using vignettes. That you only remember 20% of what I say and 90% of what you say and do. So the more in this, because we don't really call them trainings, we call them workshops. The more I can do activities that will get you from the cognitive to the internal, the more likely you are to walk away with it. Now, you know, to be left with something that kind of shifts you. That doesn't mean that, Dawn, that you can't call me and say, hey, can I process an experience that I just had? Or, you know, I mean, people do that all the time, right? And so I'm more than happy to like engage you, like, can I run this by you? Or, you know, what, you know, someone said I offended them and I'm still not sure why, or, you know, what have you. I'm doing the same thing, right? I mean, I'm leaving workshop going like, oh, I just angered someone and I just, you know, that's what we need to do. That's also what you need to be doing with each other and with, you know, and just practicing talking about it.
So I'll put this question to you and to Larry and all of the board, because I also have trust issues with the camera, and I have not been as open as I would be if the camera was not going. So if we went to the administrator training and participated in that, and maybe we divided up who went to which one, or something, would we get what we need, or what we were hoping to have accomplished? And Larry, would we interfere with their work if we showed up?
You might get what you need. I would be concerned about the impact
See
you would
that?
have
Okay.
on that training.
They'd be worried about us being there.
Okay, that's my question.
But it just makes, it just feels
Just to
handcuffed.
be-
You know who
It
else-
feels handcuffing.
Yeah, no, that's why I asked the question. So
And Larry, this is just an idea, I'm just like making, and again, the camera's on, so I'm like, okay, I don't know how much I could be announcing. I mean, even as I was giving examples, I'm like, okay, I hope that person doesn't watch this video because they'll know what I'm talking about. But I am working with another district that's close by. And I wonder, almost like you have a little bit more, kind of that granular level. They don't have like the 2 tiers, but the kind of the big work, looking at stereotypes, looking at white privilege, looking at institutional isms, they're doing similar. And I wonder if there could be an exchange, like if an exchange of board members, like a partnership.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just kind of, I don't know, some things that maybe you and I can play with.
Yeah, and if we
about-
can't make policy decisions at another district, people might not feel uncomfortable, they might not even need to know, hey, I have a board member over there.
And I don't want to volunteer
No,
another,
yeah.
but you and I can talk offline and kind of explore the power
I like
dynamics
that, yeah.
with you there are different. Even as Larry said, with him in the room,
Yeah.
make it different. And yet there's some level of just, hey, we've just got to do this and we've got to take risks. It'll also be difficult for you as you speak in front of the principals and, you know, become more human and vulnerable, because it's basically vulnerable work.
But at least it's not something that could be replayed
Yeah.
over and over again. And so, and I'm not at all criticizing, I mean, it's an open public meeting, that is fair.
Right.
So that's not against John.
I think even
I appreciate it.
Or, you know how I'm
split it
saying.
up, you're still gonna have a quorum somewhere.
No, because you
Well,
go
you just
2, we
can't.
just have to all go, 2 are going here, then these 2 are going here, and then.
You can't,
We're not gonna go
but you're
3
saying
and
the
2.
math doesn't work if you go to one.
We are
not-
doing
what's
my partner and I tried to do, so we do about 6 to 8 workshops a year open to the public. We do them in Seattle. And so email me if you want to be put on our mailing list.
That might be the way to do it.
There are conferences, like the Seattle Race Conference that's coming up. There's other ones that we make announcements of to let people inform people. We'll read a book and say, hey, this was a great book, you might want to pick it up. But we tried last year to, every year or every other year, we'll try a new one. Like we do hiring and retaining a diverse workforce, talking with children about race. There's all these different topics. We tried to do a 1.5-day board workshop that looks at kind of, I think we were including like stereotypes and I think maybe privilege, and then we were trying to do some other things. We didn't get enough people enrolled in it, so we canceled it. Now, we don't know if it was the day of the week, the time that we announced it, we don't know. So we're gonna try it one more year. And I think it's probably like in May or something. I don't remember what the date is. But you know, as you have to only go in these smaller groups, you can strategically kind of divide, say, okay, well, this group can go here, and this group can go here, and again, also, there are videos, there are conversations you can be having with family members that are, you know,
Like you said, it's the dialogue and the exchange.
it is the dialogue and it is the
That is
exchange, and it doesn't, it
also
should not be
part of the
happening just because there's a workshop. Right, courageous conversations are not, and activities are just really stimulus for dialogue. But, you know, anyway, so be thinking about that too.
Could take a multicultural psychology class.
Yeah.
I mean,
can
sincerely,
I
you're
can invite
at
2
Cascadia,
of you to come
probably.
to my next year. I always invite one
Where do you
guest to
teach at?
come. I teach at the Seattle School of Theology and
Do
Psychology.
you really? So I send some of my students there to get their graduate degree. That's what Nancy Murphy teaches.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
So-
Forrest Tinsley, he
Yes,
teaches at my school.
okay, we got to stay. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for your time, and again, email me if you want to be on our mailing list, and I will add you.
I've sent my students.
Okay.
There's all the email.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty simple.
What does that mean? Oh, just, that's literally it,
SB
okay.
District 1,
Okay.
SB District 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I'm learning too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was gonna just take it with me. Oh, well.